All right, so super excited for this discussion. Mike, thanks for being the first person to jump on one of these LinkedIn Live sessions and jump into one of these deep dives. So I'm going to give a quick overview of why we're talking about this topic. I'll flash it up on the screen, and then we'd love to hear about you. So just a quick intro to Mike. So he and I met, I'd say 4 or 5 years ago. We were both sitting on a panel talking about the importance of skills-based hiring and how we were trying to think about integrating more non-BA pipelines into early stage career paths. Super exciting topic, actually led to a whole bunch of different collaboration work. And Mike, you and I have been chatting about many different new initiatives since then. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this, which is a very hot topic right now, and hopefully something that people will come back to in the future. We're talking about how not to get stuck in a jam when hiring really starts to kick off again, when we get into a bit of a frenzy. Hopefully later this year, we'll see how the economy goes. But with 120,000 tracked layoffs so far this year, the statistics look pretty grim. But then you look at the Bureau of Labor statistics, and we see over 500,000 jobs have been added in January alone. So the market is definitely shifting. But Mike, I would love to, for anyone that doesn't already know you, to hear a bit about your background and also why is this topic so important to you?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, I am happy to be your first guinea pig. I wouldn't want to have it any other way, to be honest. So as Kristen mentioned, we've known each other for quite some time. I think the panel was for Skillist, which is no longer RIP Skillist. But I've been in the talent space for quite some time at this point. I currently am the VP of Global Talent Attraction and Growth at Snyk, which is a developer security company based here out of Boston, but with a big global footprint throughout the world. But prior to that, have spent time at really small startups, incubated startups to companies that are doing, stealth mode, Series A, B, and then have taken it into, a couple of exits, and now at Snyk, which is about 1,100 employees today. So, and then in terms of why is this topic near and dear to me? Well, in my role, it's important to, be really mindful of kind of two things. I think one is the team, right? And so, as the market shifts, as the roles slow, or as the company transition to, kind of different styles of growth, I think, being able to be mindful about how you run your team, how you keep them motivated, how you continue to show productivity in the organization is all, really, really important. And then the flip of it is, I think there's also signal that's really, really important as well. And so one of the really important signals to a business is to continue to hire, right? Continuing to show growth, even when, there's economic downturn. I think it really shows fortitude and, the ability to continue to grow and go forward. So for those reasons, this is super near and dear to my heart. And then on top of it, I just, I'm an HR nerd, so this stuff is just really interesting.
Well, it's amazing. And especially with your experience of working with some of the early stage companies and now with Snyk, I think you've had a very unique perspective on how the hiring market has shifted over the last 5 years. So really, before we get into what can we do and trying to predict the future, what kind of led us to this point? I mean, we saw the hiring slow down last summer. We've had layoffs really since then. If we back up a couple of years, could you maybe walk through what you've seen in the market and where are we right now?
Yeah, I don't want to cast any shade or blame, but I do think that there was a major, over the last 5 years, major infusion of funds into the tech space, and rightfully thinking, as people were going, I don't think anyone really thought we would end up in a global pandemic or, there would be another, major war that would, create economic chaos. But that's the position that we're in, and so we will continue forward with doing the best we possibly can. But if we're thinking about what happened, kind of 5 years ago, there were big checks being written, right? There were big checks being written. There were big infusions of cash. That cash was being used for all sorts of things, whether it was, hiring and in groves and really building out companies, to acquiring new buildings and real estate, right? Those are kind of crazy times. To building new products that maybe you were able to forward kind of proactively build because of the infusion of cash. And so I think a lot of companies started to operate 6, 12, some of them maybe even 18 months out beyond where their current kind of cash projections are. And because of that, unfortunately, when COVID started, it just started a really kind of nasty downhill effect for a lot of companies. When I was at Toast, for instance, pretty much overnight, their revenues, kind of crumbled, into, massive percentages. They're back to a great place now, but it was a really tough time for them at that point in time. And so I do think just having kind of seen all of that kind of cash get infused to a place now where everything is really more about economic efficiency and efficient growth, and making sure that if you are going to start spending, or you are spending, that you're spending it on the right things and doing things to stretch the dollar and be really efficient and scrappy with it.
So we've gone from a period of hypergrowth, blitz scaling, fueled by cheap money, to a point where now I think companies are getting a lot more focused on the bottom line and making sure they're growing a little more organically. And obviously, you've been involved in those conversations over the last 6 months, and we're looking ahead to 2023. Could you maybe talk about some of the key themes that have come out of those discussions, and what CEOs and execs are really talking about as they're thinking about headcount planning for 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest key theme that I've heard as I've kind of tapped a lot of my TA friends out in the market is that everybody's thinking about this concept of efficient growth, and where before there were the blank checks of the world being written, that day and age is just no longer. And so having more rigor around the planning process becomes the name of the game right now. Making sure that you're having really efficient and detailed conversations about team growth and org design, and really kind of the overall workforce planning of the org, so that there's really a strategy behind who you're hiring, and not just like, I need another one of those. I need another one of those. Mm-hmm. Well, do you really need another one? Could it be more junior? Could we save a little here, right? I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to just think a little bit differently. And so, some of the themes that I've seen people talking about is that efficient growth element. That I also hear a lot of people just being really honest about the market right now. I've heard different predictions. Anywhere from 6 months. We'll start to see things start to climb out to a year from now. So I've not quite sure where, but somewhere in that 6 month swing, I'm hoping. I also think the elements around quality are also becoming a very hot topic. Quality of hire is something, a buzzword out there right now, that you see a lot. People talking about, how do you measure it, how do you quantify it, how do you accurately predict it, and that's something that I'm I'm doing the same thing right now. But I do think that those are some of the key themes, and really making sure that you're able to do as much as you can with less.
Great. So I think I picked up 3 key themes there. There's the efficient growth coming from the exec team and a real focus on that area. There's a big focus on quality of hire. So moving away from hire as fast as you can, or hire as many people as you can. And actually, let's think about putting the right person in the right role. And the third thing is actually, how do we do more with less, knowing that we're now in a headcount constrained world. And I think from my own experience, and I'm sure you would agree, TA is probably front and center there of being expected to do more with less. So what does that mean for recruiting teams and even your team as you're thinking about the recruiting plan for Snyk right now?
Yeah. Well, I think, in general, not even pointing this to Snyk, and I think you can kind of generalize a lot of it right now, is that many are thinking about, how do I keep the team busy? How do I keep the team occupied and engaged? I think, and confident, right? Recruiting is much like, sales, in that there needs to be enough to go around to feed the family. And so that's, one of the things that, I think is important to balance. I think this is an opportunity to add, rigor and process, to be thinking a lot about your diversity hiring and getting really intentional around that. Getting tight on your OKRs and, the analytics and metrics that you want to hold yourself accountable to. And, thinking also about, retention, and shifting kind of the mindset of the recruiting team from, hire at all costs to, how do I, really thoughtfully help and to build this team? How do I become, more of a consultant and provide that consulting mindset, so that I open the eyes of these managers to, potentially something new. I also think there's opportunity for lots of training too. Thinking about those conversations, right? Like, how do you bring more data into those conversations? How do you, hone in on maybe some project management skills, or, how do you, think about workforce planning, a little differently? I just think there's lots and lots of opportunity for training in some of the downtime. But the name of the game still is providing productivity and, making sure that the business feels heard. And so that at the end of the day, none of that changes. Those conversations still have to happen. And setting the same expectations, becomes actually that much more important, because I think in this day and age, there's a lot of thought around, okay, you have less to do, so you'll probably do it faster. But that's not always the case. In a lot of cases, you may have less to do, or AKA less roles to fill, but those roles that you're going to fill, because of the concept around quality and making sure that you're being really efficient, there's more and more skills that are being pushed into roles now. And so, the concepts of like going out and hiring for your unicorns, becomes, more and more, apparent.
That's great. So it sounds like there's a whole bunch of tangible steps there that TA leaders should now be thinking about, and I know many are, like, how can I actually use this limited resource? Maybe they only have half or even a quarter of the team that they had even 12 months ago, but investing in setting clear OKRs with clear metrics to track, investing in keeping the recruiters engaged, building pipeline, and figuring out what's coming down the road so that they can kind of get ahead of anything, thinking about how you actually build better relationships with internal stakeholders and really kind of prepare for what's coming next. And so if you were giving advice to a recruiter who's in this position right now, and they have to message this change in focus from speeding up time to fill or seeing as many candidates as they can to a real focus on quality of hire, how would you think about delivering that message, and how would you coach that recruiter to actually feel more empowered to really drive that business stakeholder down the right path?
So I think it's great. It's a great question, and one that I think, to be honest, I'm working through right now, and I think getting better at answering, or at least advising on, because each scenario is different. But I think leading with data in this scenario is a great way to have the conversation. You can lead with historical data, and from a funnel perspective, being able to say, to get these two people to find, two candidates to final, it's going to take us 25 candidates to talk to, or whatever your funnel, your historical metrics are. Being able to have that conversation, and then being able to kind of calculate what your overall time would be, is one way to have that conversation. Another would be to really just hone in and understand from the manager exactly what is truly important from them, and then going back and providing some example profiles, within a market map, just to ensure that you're truly aligned and have heard them. The other thing is to make sure that you're super duper aligned with your L&D team, from a skills perspective, making sure that you understand as a recruiter what the right skills are for that particular team, so that as you go out to the market, you can either assess those skills, find those skills, or determine that those skills don't exist, so that you can then go back and have real conversations with the manager about trying to develop those skills in-house. So I think it's, I don't necessarily think that the conversations have changed per se, but I do think, there is more of an expectation to be able to have a greater conversation. And a lot of that comes with, data, research, and truly understanding the market.
It's great. So it's not like we're in a rush to fill roles anymore, and the recruiters can take their time and actually be a lot more critical about the roles they're hiring, really get an understanding from the business around what's needed, what does this role actually have to accomplish, a real understanding from L&D on what are the actual skills that are missing, what's been proven to be most successful in a given role, and actually how can we develop that in-house, and then a real understanding of how the market currently sits by leveraging data and actually using data front and center in those conversations. Does that capture what you?
You nailed it. And I think, it becomes opportunity for tighter alignment, with your FP&A teams. I think it becomes opportunity, to, get tighter with your business partners on the HR side, and making sure that, we're really having this like holistic conversation.
That's great. So I'm going to move to questions in the chat. So we had one question come in. Pretty excited to get your take on this. So Jasmine asked, how do recruiters and friends in TA stay resilient during times like this? I know a lot of recruiters are feeling particularly pained by the market and everything going on right now. As a recruiter, I can't lie and say it hasn't discouraged me at all.
Hey, it's a great question. I don't know if there's necessarily a one-size-fit answer for this one, but I'll give it a shot. I think, recruiters in general are resilient beings. I think, we're bred to take rejection. We're bred to, potentially spend our time and spin our wheels on things that, could potentially, shut down or, as the business pivots, so does, the need. And so I think, part of who we are is just this resilient being, but that doesn't, excuse, kind of being part of the journey, or going along for the journey with the company. And, having those same feelings that, the rest of the company might be feeling, or that others might be feeling out there. So I think in a lot of cases, my tactic is to be really transparent, to be really aligned to, in terms of our communication to the executive team, and making sure that, what I share with the team is cascaded, appropriately and effectively, so that they have a real transparent feel and vibe for where we are. I don't think sugarcoating things is helpful. I do think, there are certain audiences that should hear things, and others that shouldn't, per se, just based on experiences. But so I think communication is one. I think making sure that there's regular touch points, for teams, whether it's a daily stand-up or a weekly meeting, or check-ins, here and there. I think check-ins are super helpful. Slack makes it so easy, or whatever, IM tool, or even a text message, can make it really easy for people to stay connected. I think one-on-ones, making sure that you don't drop those. Right. I think it's like it's sacred time. Leave it on the calendar. Don't mess with it. Don't change it. That's my 2 cents on that. Still have those. Still question your people. Still continue to drive. As if and check in, right? And make asking our people how people are feeling, and how what people are up to. I also think having fun, right? Get a little silly is never anything wrong with that. So having some time to bond together, whether it's on site or virtual, better on site in my opinion. But I think it's fun to quote a proverbial let your hair down. I don't do that very often, but let your hair down and just have a lot of fun, I think is just a great thing to do. And I think the final thing is just be honest. I think you've got to be real with your people. The longer and the more you share everything through rose-colored glass, the less they're going to trust you. And so, I think you build a lot of trust and resiliency, through being honest with people. So
yeah, I think that's some great points, Mike. And I'd like to add, if I cycle back 3 years ago, we were coming off a huge reduction in force. We had to reduce my recruiting team pretty much in half. And so we were rebuilding the team right as we went into the pandemic and everyone went remote. And I feel like some of the lessons I learned from that were to really just acknowledge that times are tough and you can be authentically yourself when times are like that, and to be clear to any managers and peers if you're having a hard time, to raise your hand. And I think in most environments now, I think we're in a really good place where that kind of activity is encouraged. And what I saw actually coming out of that was an incredible bonding amongst the team. We let go of some real core members of the team, and it was painful for everybody. But coming out of the difficult time, coming out of that crucible, I feel like we really had a strong bond as a team, and we really got through the next 6 months. And 6 months later, we were firing on all cylinders again. Everyone that had been let go was in amazing new roles and were really kind of accelerating their career. And so I think the thing I always think back to is this too will pass, and if we can stay resilient, we can pull together, I think it makes us stronger in the long run. So
yeah, I here to that. I totally agree with you. It's going through difficult times together can sometimes have that opposite effect of creating bond. And at the end of the day, as long as you're creating a team and an environment where it's psychologically safe for people to come to you and bring their issues or concerns, or just even to be able to have that in an open forum, I think is really, really important for people to be able to share and be them, their authentic selves.
Absolutely. Totally agree, mate. Okay, we've had another question come in. Anka, really great to see you. Thanks for joining. It's been a while. So nice to see you both. What's your view on the role recruiting technology can play in this next phase? What would you do differently this time in terms of making thoughtful recruiting tech investments? So I'm pretty biased, but I'll let you take this one, Mike.
Well, hi, Anchor. Good to see you. Let's see. Recruiting tech. I mean, I think. Oh man. I think there's some really interesting tools, coming out, and I'm talking to someone that's building an interesting tool right now. But in general, there's lots and lots of tools coming out around, that are kind of helping to potentially make things a little bit more efficient, helping to, drive us from a signal perspective more objectively, to the right candidate. So it's less subjective and rely on the recruiter's choice. I think that, potentially some of the tools that I've purchased in the past, I purchased quickly. So if there's some things that I've learned, I think it's okay to take your time on tool selection, making sure that there's like true ROI and an opportunity to buy in. I think you also need to make sure that you have the bandwidth to onboard said new tool and add it to your day-to-day. If you don't do that, you're never going to be able to truly utilize it. And I've done that a couple of times throughout my career, and that's something I've really learned to make sure I don't do. But in terms of HR tech right now, I think in my opinion, things that are sourcing related are probably pretty interesting. I think also things that are measuring and pulsing internally, are really interesting to be able to gather more engagement data and understand where teams and how teams are feeling, I guess is probably the better way to say it. I also think that some of the tech that's around sourcing in general, I think I wish I had invested in some of that earlier on in my career. I've learned since, but I do think it helps speed up the role of the recruiter. It allows them to touch more candidates, and again, kind of falls back in line with the old school proverbial recruiting. They get to actually have those conversations. So while I can't necessarily nail like one particular, there's no silver bullet in my opinion right now. But I still think LinkedIn, the good old LinkedIn recruiter, is pretty powerful, although pretty damn expensive.
I think if I could add to that, the trend that I've seen really from just looking at the portfolio of tools we used to manage, I would double down on think about the onboarding, the training, but also the maintenance of those tools. Is the overall cost to the org actually going to create enough efficiency that you're actually going to get a net benefit, or is it actually going to be a net negative? We actually found about 80% of the tools that we were using were actually net negative when we ran the audit. And so once we removed them, performance went up. But I'd say that the trend really, and we just discussed the move from time to fill and recs per recruiter to quality of hire. I think that trend's going to continue, and I think that's probably the key theme of recruiting tech in the foreseeable future. Really, like what tools can actually help recruiters and hiring managers make better informed decisions on who to hire and who's going to stay, and then the retention tools to actually not just keep key performers in place, but actually train and develop and upskill them so that they can fill the roles that are going to be arriving in a year or two. And that's just some of the trends that I've seen from the market right now, and it's actually where we're investing as a very early stage startup.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right, and I've seen a lot of companies, especially as it relates to recruiting tech, start to make inroads into areas in the funnel where they may not have been thinking about it in the past. The kickoff, more and more conversations about job descriptions and adverts. Really, I think also more and more conversations about helping recruiters with their data seems to be very pretty popular too. So I'm excited to see where we're headed.
Absolutely, yeah. Get tools that let recruiters do their job and not get caught up in analysis and administration. Totally agree.
Exactly.
All right, Mike. So I think we're gonna wrap up, but before we do, I know that you're hiring at Snyk. Maybe you could give us a quick overview of maybe some of the key roles and what is most exciting about working at Snyk right now, and why you think anyone that's listening, whether live or on a future podcast, should consider the next role at Snyk.
Well, I think, before I dive into the roles, the thing that gets me excited about Snyk right now is just there's a lot of opportunity to come build a career here. We're just starting to kind of break ground on, what a potential marketplace may look like. And we've rolled out an amazing internal mobility product, essentially, program that is really driving things forward. So we're very excited about the future, and as we think about the development of people and skills. So that's why I think people should come to Snyk. Not to mention just amazing people and a great culture, but I think the differentiator is developing people. In terms of opportunities, we've got roles, I think, almost literally across the board at this point, from sales to marketing, to business development, to engineering galore and product. There's even a procurement business partner role. So there's all sorts of opportunities right now for people at Snyk. And we just opened all of our intern co-op roles as well. So there's lots and lots of recruiting happening right now.
Amazing. So it's not just going to be a job, you're actually going into a career in Snyk. With an amazing team, an amazing vision, and an incredible growth trajectory. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate you joining me on the call, and would be happy to answer any follow-up questions that anyone has. We're going to record this and we're going to release it back in chunks on LinkedIn. So pretty excited to hear what people say.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.